Hey, good evening, Galleon. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary. I'd like to tell you that we have all kinds of exciting things to relate to you tonight, and we're so excited we can barely sit still. But I think the truth of the matter is we've got a couple of small issues that have been leading the office in terms of phone calls and inquiries. So I want to hit on those items, and then talk more generally about about a couple of bigger issues that'll really become more apparent as we get into the end of this year and into 2021. That's a reference to the budget and what it looks like. It's something I've talked about last couple of weeks. Hey, on the kind of small but important questions that we're getting, it's probably easy for folks to imagine that what had become kind of a tradition of us distributing, I think 75 turkeys or something like 100 turkeys, I'm told. The last few years, our benefactor, if you will, which is our property insurance company, I believe. Is that right? No.
Workers' comp.
Boy, Matt, why don't you? I'll switch. I'll write down the questions and you give it is workers' comp, the folks that help our administration with the workers' comp claims and administering that program. They've been pretty good about providing those turkeys. They do a lot of business other than with public entities. So I think in a lot of their clients' cases, the turkeys go to the employees. We're not able to do that, distribute those to the city employees. So what we've done is distribute them on kind of a first come, first served basis. They didn't want to do it that way this year, and so what they have done is distribute a number of $10 food cards, I believe. I got one thing right, $10 food cards. What we decided to do was to contact ministries, mostly churches. In fact, they're all churches, aren't they, Matt?
Correct.
Yeah. And those that are going to have some sort of drive-through meal. And so those are at, run through the list. I know Grace Point.
Sure. Grace Point, First United Methodist, St. Paul United Methodist, Peace Lutheran, and First Lutheran.
All right, Lutherans, Methodists, and did you say St. Vincent de Paul?
I did not. Thank you.
How could you leave out those charitable Catholics? So it's those organizations. So it's really what's that called? Non-denominational or interdenominational, ecumenical, one of those three words. But we thought that was the best way to get that accomplished. What they'll do is take those cards and use those to buy the supplies for the meals that they'll have in whatever form or fashion. So if you're looking for some relief, a good meal on Thanksgiving, that's probably the best way to do it. We're not doing turkeys, and we'll see how it goes next year. I mean, my hope would be that we would go back to that. It's kind of fun to see people get here beforehand. It's I don't know. There's a lot of stuff about this job that's not much fun. Being part of getting turkeys to 75 or 100 folks in town was always a lot of fun. We'll try to do it next year. The other thing, and these are not to be connected, you don't take the leaves and put them in your turkey, but we're getting a lot of questions now about are we still picking up leaves, and I think the answer to that is we'll continue to pick them up, weather permitting, and so there is a certain routine that they're on, but we're really getting to the point where we're getting people calling either at this office or the street department number and identifying neighborhoods or certain locations that need them picked up. So if you can't seem to determine when they're going to be in your neighborhood, a good way at this point in the leaf pickup season is to give a call either to the mayor's office or I think it's 468-1828, I believe is the street department number. No?
468-2818.
2818. All right. Let's see if I can get one of these things right before we sign off. So anyways, leaf pickup. A lot of calls about that, and I understand. And certainly after last weekend with all that wind, I'm sure that we'll continue to be active in that within our service department. So those two items are, kind of relatively small things. Let me hit on a couple of items that we really haven't talked a lot about on Monday nights, and I think candidly because we've been trying to work through the situation that the city is in and a good operating solution going forward. So what am I talking cryptically about? It's the ownership of the Central Hotel. And here in a matter of a few weeks, the city will be the owner of the hotel. And our plan is to work at least over the interim period with the operator of the hotel. I think it's Fairfield Homes. Yeah, I got that right, Fairfield Homes. And they provide the day-to-day management and operations. What we'll be doing early on into 2021 is looking at that operation in terms of who's going to operate on a daily basis, and for the most part continue to operate the apartment building like it has been since it was put back in shape now over 5 years ago, right around 5 years ago. So that'll be going on. I think from the city's point of view, we're not in the landlord business, so I think it is likely that we'll find an operator. I can't imagine that the city will actually be the day-to-day operator of the hotel. So we'll either find a local property management company to handle it, or continue to look for some of the firms like have been in charge in the past. There are a handful of those type of real estate management companies, and that's what I would expect to happen. I think on a day-to-day basis for the residents and their families, I hope that you don't see any change except maybe a change for the better. And when you get to the end of a contract like we were in with these other owners, the ability to get enough capital to keep the place kept up to tip-top shape and as clean as possible, those items we're going to really focus on early next year. And to the extent we honestly get very few complaints from residents, but I don't think for a moment that doesn't mean there's some issues up there. And so one of the things we'll do, I'd have to tell you probably early next year, would be to go up, set up a meeting with the residents and talk to them about how things have gone since a couple, 3 years ago when, to be honest with you, it was the last time I was in the place. So we keep an eye on it, but again, our attention is going to be a lot more focused going forward. We can talk a little bit, if people have questions about how the city got in the position of owning that hotel and what are the up or downsides of that. But suffice it to say, we're in the residential apartment building business, and there are critics perhaps of that, but I can't imagine that corner of the square if it had not been renovated and it was somewhere between an unoccupiable building and a parking lot, sort of the no man's land of what are we going to do with it next. So really for most people, especially the residents, we hope nothing changes but for the better, but it is something that hasn't been talked much about, how that property was, if you want to say it's the real estate term is put to the city. We accepted their option to give us the hotel back. So that's what's going on there. Let me hit on two more topics, and we may have some questions. We'll kind of see how it goes. It's really hard to predict, at least for me, how things are going. The budget, generally speaking, is moving ahead surprisingly well, particularly in view of some. Certainly, in addition to the city auditor's medical challenges, we've had key staff off over the last week or two, and so we're moving forward. I believe Wednesday is in the morning would be a sort of a run through with the finance committee chair, council president, and then Wednesday evening will be a finance committee meeting. And although nothing's been exactly determined, I suspect that one will be a committee meeting that will seem to a viewer, somebody tuning in on Facebook or somebody who's just casually interested, that could be a real bone grinder. Doc Fellner's in the habit of saying, make sure you bring a pillow and a sleeping bag. I don't think it'll go on for hours, but Wednesday night will likely be the first chance for council members to look at the overall budget, and that would be at the finance committee level, and then they'll certainly have some questions based on it. And without brushing with too broad a brush, really not many changes. A major change is a little bit of a bump up in health insurance, but not as bad as maybe we had expected. And sort of a secondary part, but what goes on in this budget is we're likely to have maybe a handful, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 retirements that will result in that inevitable chain reaction where new openings will come up. So if anyone has an eye on or thought about working for the city, I'd advise over the next few months keeping an eye on civil service postings and jobs that somebody who's underemployed or unemployed now might qualify for. So in terms of the budget, there'll be a little bit of turnover. It's really not a very consequential, but we'll take people at their senior ends of the pay range with a lot of longevity pay, and for certain higher end employees at the lower end of the pay scale and with less seniority, that pays out around here in the first pay in December, what's called longevity pay. It's hard to imagine, but longevity pay has been part of the city's contract for a longer time than I've been haunting city, county, and state government, so that's quite a while. So the longevity pay, those will go down, and I think that will go a long ways to offset the insurance increases, particularly in the first year when you have the new employees and they're at starting pay. So I think that's worth mentioning. And I've mentioned this a couple times, so it comes as no great surprise or no, oh my God, no one told us. But I would expect water rates to be raised almost for certain. Council will have to make a decision about whether or not to raise sewer rates, and I think that discussion will go on yet this year and maybe into next year. But we've got to a point where a couple $1 a month, a $5 a month at the most for high volume water users, this being the residential, of course, is probably a necessity. It's not, I want to say in the cards because I've trivialized it, but it's pretty much a necessity for us to maintain the kind of solvency, the kind of cash balance we need in that water fund. I think as many people know, it's an independent fund. The water and sewer, electric funds stand on their own. So in any case, I think water rates are going to be adjusted, and I'm going to really avoid talking in terms of percentages, a 15% or a 12% increase. We're going to try to really talk in terms of how much it is in terms of dollars and cents per month. And we can talk about why. I prefer to do it because when you say 15%, it seems like a lot, but when you say $1.50, even people of meager means have to understand that the cost of providing something like high quality water at the tap whenever you need it is, you have to pay for that if we're going to have that kind of continued service. So that's enough on the budget. I could talk about it for hours, but I think over the next 3 days I'll have plenty of time to discuss with council and begin to finish that 2021 budget exercise. A couple more things and then I'll stop for a second. Surprised, I was talking with Matt earlier today and then again tonight before we turned on the live stream. I'm frankly disappointed and surprised at how few of our utility customers have followed through on that $100 credit. I know the language was off-putting to some, and there was some discussion on social media about worried about getting caught downstream for applying for something that you couldn't prove in terms of a loss of wages or some of the other qualifying things. I would say this, though. We're going to spend very little time at City Hall and at the billing office verifying whether, if Matt Eckelberry says that he's been adversely affected, he's got an account, we're going to spend very little, or I would say no time at all, tracking that down to make sure that the statement that he makes, and I say that in a hypothetical, is legit. And so we set the budget, if you will, up for this, expecting maybe 75 or 80% of our 6,000 customers to apply for the credit, and I don't think we've broken the 1,000 the level of 1,000 requests. So encourage people. I think in the notification that was sent out, the window drops. It's cut off on the 19th. We'll be talking as there's a tendency for a lot of people, myself included, to pay right before the time when you have to pay. So I think it's the 19th. At the end of this week, we'll see a lot of people making that payment. I know that the 19th was the date we set to apply for the credit. Mostly, go ahead.
November 30th is the deadline.
It's the 30th. I guess 19th is the day you better pay, or they're going to come and shut you off day. So I expect between the 19th, over the next couple of days, up to the 19th, and then thank you to the 30th, to apply for the credit. We really want to do that so as to be able to reallocate the money, redeploy, if you'll accept that term, any unused funds, rather than having them be recalled by the state or the feds. I say that, I don't know how in the world they're going to do it. I could show you where they're already on the city's books, that they are. The money is already on the city's books, so it's a little yet to be determined as far as how unspent monies would go back, but the authority to spend it does go away at the end of the year. Really would like to get its, I think, council and our office's intended purpose fulfilled, and that's to get $100 credit to people. I'm of the opinion that almost everybody in town has been adversely impacted by this COVID, and you know, who's to say what the next couple 3 weeks will hold. So wag my finger. If you believe you're entitled to a credit, apply. I don't expect us to spend much, if any, time auditing those signed requests for the credit. I can see we got a question come on. I want to hit one more thing. Tomorrow night, there's been, I think the community, I don't want to say it's divided, but the level of information and the enthusiasm around the community for the construction of the Freeze Center, the Freeze Event Center, Athletic Center. I got to tell you, if you're out of the discussion, there has been active planning going on. And what I expect for people who are interested in the project, have heard about it, maybe some they're saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're still talking about that. Those of you who haven't heard much in a while, I'd really encourage you to either live stream tomorrow night's Economic Development Committee, Council's Committee, or make a point to get your hands on that through a shared social media. I think we'll have it on our Facebook site on after tomorrow night. And my hope is that there'll be a good discussion about what the facility is expected to cost, where the Port Authority is in terms of developing those costs, and some of it will be process, what contractors, those kinds of discussions, but I think there'll be a lot of important discussion, the substance about what are the costs revolving around this, and my goal is not to divide the community in any way, but to begin to get um, endorsements, if you will, letters of support, resolutions of various groups around town that are supportive of it. What kind of groups am I talking about? Groups perhaps like the school board. Another group that I think is important in this discussion is what the YMCA board believes its value is to the community. And so what I expect to happen is a reinitiation of a discussion about this project, which when it's all said and done and the key is turned and the lights are turned on, the keys turned, people are using it, is going to push up around in a total expenditure up in around $10 million. The building and whatever infrastructure costs to get that building connected in all the water, sewer, electric, stormwater, and roadway. So those elements all combined are, it's going to be a pretty large project, and I think it's important that the decision ultimately is made based on a lot of information. So what I think you'll hear tomorrow's presentation about where the Port Authority thinks they're at in terms of readiness to make a formal request for funding, and probably not as much, but I hope the beginning of a discussion about how we're going to raise those kinds of funds without putting in jeopardy other parks projects, and to some people's mind, putting in jeopardy kind of the nest egg the city needs if we were ever to get in any type of future financial problem. So, big discussion. If I had my way, it would be one of those mini series, but I don't have my way very often. And we'd spend a couple hours on it, because one of my concerns is that people reject the idea without knowing enough about it, or rush to embrace it without fully understanding what the costs will be and what the challenge is to make it a success 5, 7, 10 years from now. So I'm still real enthusiastic about the project. Anything you've worked on for 4 or 5 years, not realized it to completion, you either get tired of it and put it up for sale at a garage sale, or you just renew your interest. And so I continue to be enthused about the upside potential of the facility. But I think as a community, we're going to have to really reckon with some costs that will require us to be committed on this. I don't want to move ahead on a project and have one element of the community or 2 or 3 elements of the community begin hissing or cat calls from the cheap seats. The old timers remember old Bob Euchre from the cheap seats. I don't think we want to do that. So what I'm really embarking on is to try to get as many endorsements from as many various community groups, kid groups, youth groups, school boards outside the city of Galion, perhaps, to show the kind of support that's out there, so that those skeptics, that if it's completed, that skepticism will be satisfied, because people will be using it through the week and on the weekends. So, all right, there's a big build-up. What'll be funny tomorrow night is if there's a presentation and the discussion tomorrow night is half as long as the hype that I tried to generate around the idea tonight for tomorrow's discussion. So, bunch of stuff out there: turkeys, leaves, Central Hotel, the budget, CARES Act Plan B. We're going to work really hard to spend those CARE dollars that were, albeit late, that came to the city, all late in the time that we had to spend it. And so we'll redeploy them, but I really continue to believe that the best use for that would impact the most number of Galionites is this utility credit. We'll come up with a plan B if we need to. So make a note to go ahead and get that in if you haven't, that being the credit request, and we'll see how we are in another week or so. Matt?
It's
go.
and staying
Go
on
ahead,
the
yeah.
topic of the utility credit. A couple people were asking what type of proof that they need to present. Can you kind of go over?
No,
what
I really
the
think
requirements-
my take on it, the language in that letter that went out talks about losing wages and whatnot. We're not going to require any documentation of that. It really is, you sign the form, we trust you every month that you're going to pay your bill. And I'll tell you what, all this year, for the most part, that's been one of the more remarkable parts of this COVID thing from the perspective of City Hall is how committed ratepayers are to making sure, even during the time when they knew they weren't going to get shut off, people were paying their bills. So I haven't done that. I think that we'll trust you. If you say you've been adversely affected, you sign that, you're the account holder. Our plan is to process that credit.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Now let's switch topics here to some other questions we had. First one came from Josh. He said the high winds yesterday should have been enough for the city to figure out what they are going to do with the old trees in the tree lawn.
Well, you know, it is, Josh. That's a interesting take on that. I'll tell you, when the tree falls on your neighbor's car, or when it's really bad, it falls on your house. It's an absolute catastrophe, and you think that the damage is widespread. So I'll start by going against the grain of the question. Our service department was surprised. Nobody's pleasantly surprised, but we were surprised at how little damage there were. I think there were 10 trees that we assisted, 10 or 12 trees that we assisted. Where I agree with Josh, and the other part of his question is the city deciding to do something about that. And without getting into too much bone grinding detail, the way the ordinance is now is that our building inspector should be notifying people with dead or dangerous trees in the tree lawn and directing those people to take that tree down. And if they don't, then we will take it down and we'll put that on their taxes. I don't think that's a real workable solution. And I want to say within council, there are a couple council members who believe there's sort of conflicting ordinances, and that it really doesn't say that. There's an ordinance that is argued those trees are ours. But I don't want to sidetrack too far. I think one of the ideas that was suggested is, based on this, isn't this enough to wake the city up, or whatever the expression was. Don't take offense to it, but we're well aware of it. You can imagine when that wind's blowing. I don't know what you're worried about your own trees and your own property, but as mayor, I think about, oh gosh, I wonder how many of those trees will go down. There was a discussion about 6 weeks ago about the idea of putting some amount of money in the city budget next year and going forward to take care of those trees. The city has a contract with an area tree trimmer that clears the electric lines of trees. Anything within 10 feet of one of our primary lines, it gets trimmed back. Sometimes it looks like a god-awful haircut, but that's what those tree trimmers are limited to, and I'm not real interested in changing that. But what we could do is allocate some money within the city budget and begin to address either neighborhood by neighborhood or by some sort of arborist assisted, this is the worst, most dangerous, that kind of thing. So I'm really have no opposition to spending oh my golly, let's just say $150,000, imagining they're at a 4,000 to 5,000 tree clip. You can get an idea of how that initial 100,000 would just whet the appetite to go more systematically throughout the city. So what I would say to Josh is, if you know any council members, I'd give them a call and ask them to support having something in the 2021 budget that could tackle the worst of these trees. In the meantime, we'll continue to take care of the trees in a quadrant by quadrant, kind of systematically going around the city, clearing those kinds of trees, those dangerous trees and tree limbs out from near our electric lines. So.
We did have a couple of follow-up comments on
Yeah.
this topic, so I just want to share.
No, I can imagine.
Yep. First, I had one from Sherry. If the city would have just cut the tree down on Market, I would still have my car. So it
Right.
sounds like she was the victim over on Market Street of that fallen tree. And then Josh said,
And the only thing I'd say about that is that either through the property, I saw pictures of it. I don't know whose property that tree was on, but if they have homeowners insurance, that's one area to pursue. And the other issue is the car insurance. Now, what would really stink is if you were a little bit upside down in the car. You owed a few thousand more than the insurance company will give you if it's a total. But I don't know what to say beyond that. It does, when you don't have your own garage or off-street parking, it does present a problem. And I'm not unsympathetic is it Sherry? Is that her comment? I'm not unsympathetic. I think we should probably begin addressing that issue 20, 30, 40 trees a year at a time until we get some of those large trees. I think everyone who's either been out rubbernecking and checking it out or who have heard, it really is one section of town that got it. Last year we had that mini tornado or whatever it was. It came up Grand and across Market Street, kind of along the tracks, and then blew up some stuff down at Urban Industries. So it is real localized when that happens. From what I understand, it was Summit, 2 or 3 on North Union, and just a block away there on North Market where we had most of the damage. But on serious answer to Sherry's question, I hope there's some insurance money that will help her get back on the road. Okay, what other comments?
Josh had a follow-up to that. When the city had its own tree trimmers, the community didn't really have this problem. The trimmers would remove the bad trees or keep them trimmed back.
Well, I really appreciate this sort of give and take, but I disagree with that. I'm not sure. There's different versions of how it was. I don't know at what point in the past Josh is talking about, but I can tell you that this is the 7th year we've been mayor. That wasn't the experience. In fact, we had more outages due to tree trimming, and those guys did a good job. And no one was laid off as we got out of that business. We had a retirement and 2 people promoted out of the tree trimming ranks. Take that back. We had 2 retirements and a couple guys promoted up. Their linemen are on their way to being linemen. So nobody was, from a staffing point of view, was hurt by it. But it was about between $250,000 and $300,000 a year to staff that 3-person crew. Wages, benefits, equipment. And so I'll own the decision to phase out the tree trimmers. We now spend half of that much money on the electric tree trimming. And I don't want to get into a long debate, but there's a lot of folklore at City Hall about people who had their tree on a list, some fictitious list. There was no list. I mean, somebody may have written it down, but there were the point that the trees came down in the past. That may have been true. Let's say prior to the financial collapse, but it was certainly not the case when I became mayor. I think we're getting more done for about half as much money, and that has to do with the way the contractor approaches it, and it's not meant to be a crack on the employees, the guys, for the most part, guys that did that before we phased it out. It's so anyway, we can talk about the tree trimming. I tell you what, there is a lively debate. There's a couple people on city council that agree with Josh's point of view, but the way it's set up now, we're going to use contractors, and we'll use a little. I would propose using a little bit of the difference between the old tree trimming staff and the way it's done now. So, anyways, I'm tempted to get into how those trees that had nothing to do with the electric bill, those staffers were all paid with your electric bill, but that gets into kind of a crappy little wonky discussion about cost allocation and fund accounting. Speaking of which, if anybody's interested in cost allocation and fund accounting, there is an opening here soon in the Galion City Auditor's Department. Been surprised that there hasn't been more interest. Had an opportunity to talk to one interested. I hope you could describe this person as a candidate, but been a little bit surprised. I knew I'd find a way to work that in there, but I think it's a pretty important job, and getting somebody in that office, the sooner the better, will be good for the continued operation of city government. All right, enough. All right, that's a shameless plug, but you should call up here at City Hall if you're interested in doing it. It's a job that needs to be done, and we can talk about the positives and negatives about the position, but certainly in a lot better shape than how Brian Trish found the job when he came in, hands down. And so I just want to go ahead and say that it's better off than when Brian said, "Yeah, I'll try to do this." So it's a doable job, and I think we're going to find someone. Not to age discriminate, but I really think the people who see themselves the future of Galion over the next 30 years, instead of somebody like me the next 30 months, people are going to be in the community for a long time. Somebody, have a talk with yourself, pray on it if you do, and if you're interested in helping the city out, it'd be a real good way to deliver service to your community. So, all right. What else we got?
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next, I have one from Dawn. First, she complimented the city on the new pavement throughout town.
Thanks.
And then, kind of to the question, then there have been a few citizens kind of on social media here recently, kind of, I don't know, sharing some ideas about different things that can be done with the bike trail. Including maybe some Christmas decorations along the path. She just wanted to get kind of the city's
I saw that
take on
stuff. My wife's really good about showing me the stuff. She doesn't show me when they're saying I'm a crooked, left-handed, stupid Irishman. She doesn't show me that stuff. I hear it's out there though. But no, I saw that, and there were some really good ideas. Earlier this year, when we were trespassing, people were out there walking on it before it was open, and I don't think people in, let's say, March or April envisioned this COVID, turning everything upside down. We began to talk about at City Hall and around the O'Leary household the idea of a kind of haunted, either hayride or a haunted walking trail. Then I saw a handful of things. An old Job and Family Services a colleague of mine, Anita Tenike, had a comment on there about crafting along there. I thought that was a really good idea by Anita. So, Dawn, I saw that stuff. I think it's really a good idea. I wish I could steal the idea and call it my own, but I really think that makes sense to do some things with that bike trail. I think that are craft oriented or are seasonal in terms of things like Christmas lights and or the lack of electricity may killjoy some things, but certainly the Halloween season might be a really cool time. I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it was just last week, I was effusing about how impressed I was with the spooktacular at the middle school. That type of thing that they did up in the middle school parking lot could be done, and a real fun time for families. And so yeah, I saw that, Don. It's a great idea. And we get the masks off and get back to some 2021, maybe things will be a little bit different, but it's great. If you've not been out there, folks, go out there on that bike path. You probably got a couple days left, unless you really like this brisk weather. But you get a feel for what those people have been talking about, its potential. So we'll plan this winter and try to roll out some fun stuff in the spring. But great suggestion.
Okay, and then let's see. Looks like the next one came from Tanya. She asked, why not use the CARES Act money toward the water fund instead of raising water rates?
Well, I think we need to do both. The CARES Act money is going to help individual residents. It's credited to your account, so that the city won't get any net increase in that money. Well, you'll use federal dollars that will be used to credit your account. So the water fund won't get healthier. Why the need for a modest water rate increase? Again, a couple, three, for almost anyone but that household with a lot of teenagers, $4 to $5 a month. The main reason is because the fund has been losing money the last several years. Going back now to be 6 years ago, decision was made by council and myself to lower water and sewer rates, and in fact we did do that in a way that it provided some pretty meaningful relief. I'd be quick to say that was in conjunction. It was at the same time that we had to make the last increase in our electric rates. So the water and sewer rates were reduced, and for many customers, that was offset. That water reduction was offset by an increase in electric rates. So I want to mention that. But the main reason that we have to both credit people's customers with the CARES dollars and increase rates gradually is because we can't continue to spend more money on the treatment and distribution of water than we're taking in, and that's the situation we've been in the last 2 or 3 years. How's that for a really crappy answer? If you didn't like the answer, you thought, well, you just talked right around that. You didn't even try to answer that question. I think I tried to answer, we need both. We need to get that money back to you, the CARES dollars, but we also need to increase water revenue gradually in order to stop that negative cash flow. So, you got a question in there about how wonderful Come Home to Galleon's going to be. No, let me think here. What else? I mean, it's hard to deliver a crappy message. There's no way to deliver a now everybody smile and buck up. We're going to increase your water rates. Take a couple more dollars a month out of your pocket, but we've put it off about as long as we can, and so that's really what the discussion will be, both in the short term and then as the 2021 budget gets put into play, gets the revenue starts to come in and expenditures start to happen. So, what else we got?
That is all I had for this evening.
All right, I'll go out. I'm going to go on a hunt tomorrow and the next day and the day after that to find out when and how quickly we can get the old Pico building torn down. I think I'm not a very patient person, so I've been trying to be patient about that, but remind folks that there was $2.5 million secured for the partially for the demolition of that old Pico 2, and before that power equipment building, and then the construction of a new spec building. So that's the question going forward on the development front. When are we going to see some action going on out there with the old Pico building? So if you're not asking that question, be assured that I will be asking. And with all that being said, I appreciate you tuning in tonight, and try to enjoy what would be an absolutely horrible Monday night football game. Bears and the Vikings. Oh well. Good night to get to bed early. But thank you a lot for watching, and pass along the word about the CARES Act. Get your refund in so we don't have to go to a plan B. And from there we'll go from there. Sorry about the turkeys, but we'll be here next year for that. Good night.